People are starting to come in. We'll give it another minute. Let's more people join, and then we'll get started here. Give it another minute.
Sounds good, Lawrence.
Okay, why don't we get started? All right, we'll get started here. Good afternoon, everybody, or yeah, evening, depending on where you're at. My name's Lawrence. I'm the general manager of North America for Galen Growth. Galen Growth is the preferred healthcare innovation partner with clients across the healthcare industry, from pharmacos to insurance companies, other ventures and ventures, as well as other organizations, consulting all across the entire healthcare system. We have a global reach. We have offices in the US, Europe, and Asia. The world's leading digital health private market data intel insight platform, which is HealthTech Alpha. It's used by both industry, investors, and startups. It's more data than any other platform, approximately 16,000 digital health ventures, the best in class taxonomy, and better search results than even Google, with an unmatched team of experts behind the platform. The platform powers all of the thematic reports that we do, including the one we discussed today. You can go to galengrowth.com and go to our research page and see all our work out there, as well as the advisory work, some of the advisory type of things we do for Fortune 500 companies. Today's focus is on the North American digital health clinical evidence in 2022. This is an annual report. It analyzes over the 12,000 plus ventures that are incorporated after 2002 and private. The full length of the report is 60 plus pages, and the data is unmatched in insight, available to our HealthTech Alpha enterprise clients. Again, this is an annual report that we do. So I'm going to introduce you to the other member here on the panel, and that is Sarah. She is the head of research and data analytics for Galen Growth. And so Sarah, why don't we jump right into it? Let's start off with clinical evidence. What is it and why does it matter in digital health? I mean, we hear a lot of buzz about it lately, but what is it? Why does it matter?
Thanks for the warm welcome, Lawrence, and hello to everyone out there. Glad to be here tonight. Yeah, clinical evidence. Clinical evidence is was kind of starting to be a buzzword in digital health. We don't really want it to be a buzzword. We published this report last September about clinical strength in digital health. Clinical evidence are the proof points that ventures have to show that, first of all, they're capable of medical grade development. Depending on what their product might be, that has a different meaning. And it's proof that there are benefits to the user or the patient for the solution that they're developing, right? That proof comes in different ways. We're going to talk about that in more depth, but clinical evidence is really showing that they do bring a benefit to the patient and they're capable of producing medical grade products. Okay,
so they can do what they're touting, right?
Yeah, well, I was in medical device development myself. I worked for a startup in insulin pumps, and anyone who's worked there knows it's not easy to create a medical grade product. So this is important.
Yeah, so it is important. So how does Galen Growth evaluated ventures clinical evidence? How does it score? How do we score them?
That's a great question. And as soon as I can get my mouse to work, I'll answer it. There we go. So last year, what we did is understanding the importance of this area and knowing that we can't look at all the quality certificates for each particular venture. We've developed a evidence signal for each venture, and that's then a signal. The rating goes from 0 to 100. Which is what you see on the pyramid on the left. And this signal is composed of 3 different elements. And that is, first of all, clinical trials. If the venture has applied for and is in the process of running, or they've gotten approval for to run a clinical trial, and they're in the process of running it, or if they've completed that clinical trial, then that means they have some medical grade capability, development capability. Right, because actually being approved to run a clinical trial takes a lot of high quality evidence. Second of all, regulatory filings, right? And we're not just talking about FDA registrations. Those anybody can do without any evidence. A filing is, a 510(k) clearance or some sort of PNA, any sort of regulatory approval with the FDA, with the regulatory body in Europe or a regulatory body in other places across the globe, right? So any of those regulatory filings also show that they have evidence that their solution does bring a benefit to the patient. And finally, the third piece of the puzzle, the third piece of evidence that we use to calculate our evidence signal are peer-reviewed journal articles, right? They have to be peer-reviewed, those journal articles are weighted differently than the clinical trials and regulatory filings, of course, but that is bringing evidence that the venture is capable of scientifically solid development, right? So you have those 3 elements. We put them together to create our evidence signal. The pyramid on the left is showing what the signal is telling you, okay? If it has a score of 0 to 20, that means there's no clinical strength, right? There isn't any evidence, perhaps yet, that there's the clinical strength, right? Anything from 20 to 40 means that they've started writing peer-reviewed journal articles, right? They've started releasing those and started to show that, they're building evidence, right? And that's a building clinical strength phase. Now, once you meet 40, an evidence signal 40, that's kind of our key number to look out for. That means either they have a clinical trial under their belt, they have a regulatory filing under their belt, or they have at least 4 peer-reviewed journal articles, right? And so we say if they reach a signal of 40, then they have established clinical strength, right? After that, then there's icing on the cake, right? Maybe they have multiple products on the market, and that then starts building the clinical evidence, right? They're having clinical trials for different indications. So that's where you get above 40 to 80 and then up to 100, right? But we have a clear line at evidence signal of 40 saying, okay, now they've established kind of a baseline that they are bringing a benefit to the patient or to the user, as it might be. So that's the picture. That's what it looks like, Lawrence. And keep in mind that border of 40 is what we're going to look at as we continue further into the report.
Okay, so that's how we evaluate clinical evidence, or evaluate clinical evidence is. Let's start with some global context here. What does clinical evidence broken down into its key components look like globally?
Well, if you look at those key components, and those are the clinical trials, regulatory filings, and peer-reviewed journal articles, right? A key question is how many ventures really have those, right? We're talking about, some digital health ventures are creating wellness apps. Some are doing other teleconsultation ventures. There we have our taxonomy of digital health, and there's a broad array. So if we get into the numbers, right, and that's what we're doing globally, 7% of all digital health ventures that we have cataloged, right? We have over 13,000 ventures cataloged. 7% of them have applied for or have completed clinical trials, right? 9% have regulatory filings, and 10% have peer-reviewed publications, right? So the numbers are still small, but it is definitely, there's evidence that, yes, digital health ventures are capable of building this evidence, and they are beginning to go down that path.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we've been, we're at Health, and we heard a bunch of it, a bunch about clinical evidence or proof points at Health, and I'm sure we're going to be at ViiV, and I'm sure we'll hear it there as well. But how has clinical evidence been trending globally?
Looking at a trend, I said, they are beginning to build that evidence, and that's kind of snowballing, right? Which is great. If you look from 2012 to 2022, right, the amount of evidence, and these numbers are cumulative. The amount of evidence has been significantly growing per year. I'm sorry, they're not cumulative. That's per year. That's how much evidence is being generated per year, right? So it's really a great trend to see. The biggest part of that are the publications, as we know. Clinical trials are also growing as well as regulatory filings. So with a 5-year CAGR of about, well, the numbers about 37, 38, 39%, it's growing at quite a good rate. And we expect that trend to continue. First of all, because the number of ventures is increasing, and second of all, because they're maturing and having the capability of generating that evidence. Speaking of which, if you guys download the full report, you'll see we have estimated what's how old is a venture when they first start generating clinical evidence, and the analytics show that as a median number, ventures are about 7 years old as a median when they cross that threshold of clinical strength, or the evidence signal of 40, right? So it takes a median of 7 years for ventures to build this evidence that you see.
Okay. So, again, as we, as Galen Growth is the only digital health insight firm to track all 5 digital health ecosystems, can you share with us what clinical evidence looks like in each of those regional ecosystems?
I can, starting with the donut on the right here. The amount of digital health evidence that we've been talking about that's accumulated across the globe, 52% of that evidence is attributable to ventures within North America, right? So they do take over half of the evidence that has been produced to date, followed by 25% of that for European ventures, and 16% Asia Pacific, 6% Middle East. Keep in mind the US, or excuse me, the North American ecosystem is bigger, right? So it is, the US ecosystem has about 36% of the ventures globally, but still they're owning 52% of the evidence. And so it's a matter of growth of the ecosystem. The US is ahead. But if we look at these numbers in terms of how many ventures are there in each ecosystem, right? Then we see the top performer is actually the Middle East. That includes Israel, right? 20% of all ventures in the Middle East do have an evidence signal greater than 40. They've established their clinical strength. So they're the leaders, followed by Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific. Right? You can see if you go through the details, a little bit more information, but that's the global picture, right? It is a global topic, and as far as the North America, Europe, and the Middle East, we're all at a pretty good level as far as the number of ventures who've established clinical strength.
All right, we're kind of focusing in here on North America today. North America's digital health ecosystem. Let's walk through what clinical evidence looks like in North America, and what does the clinical evidence landscape look like in North America.
Gladly. Okay. In the U.S., as I showed you before, they have the largest number of ventures with an evidence signal greater than 40, and also 19% of those ventures are reaching that milestone, right? But that's followed across the globe, right? Europe, we showed, was ahead, or was ahead of the US, slightly behind the Middle East, which is Israel. So there's details there about the particular countries that you see. And if we go further and look then into the most active partners, right? Who's actually, because clinical strength, it's not just interesting for people who want to know more about digital health, right? It's important for investors, because if you want to invest in a venture that is 7 years old, then you should be able to expect that they're at least building or have established their clinical strength, right? This is what we're saying. This is the importance of it. If a corporation is looking to partner in digital health, and what you see here, the most active partners, you have 4 biopharma companies, and then you have the NHS in England, right? So really big players. They're the most active partners with established clinical strength ventures, and it's really important for ventures to get these partnerships in motion, because a lot of times it's that partnership that helps them develop the clinical strength, right? This is looking at partnerships that have been developed, and maybe they were developed even before the evidence has been generated, right? In order to run a clinical trial, you need a lot of financial strength or financial help, and you need a lot of resources to run a clinical trial or to have a regulatory filing. And that's what these partnerships can really help a venture do. They help them establish that evidence and get the products then approved and on the regulatory path.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Digital health is scaling to reach patients, it needs partnerships. Is this critical activity slowed in North America? Who leads the sector? Who's been the most prolific in 2022?
Let's see. As far as being prolific, should we talk about perhaps a partnership? If we look at AstraZeneca, jump into one of those particular partners that we've been talking about, right? AstraZeneca is on the top, one of the top 3 pharma companies as far as partnerships with digital health. And as you saw, they were number 3 exactly as far as partnerships with established clinical strength, right? 44% of their partnerships are with ventures that have established clinical strength, right? They have a 67, it's their average alpha score, so they're partnering with more mature ventures. Something that, if that's interesting for you, you can look at our Pharma Digital Health Innovation Index report that talks a lot about the maturity of ventures and how that fits into biopharma portfolios. And something that we haven't talked about yet really is 76% of their ventures are in the top clusters by the amount of ventures with evidence, right? If you look into the full report that goes along with this webinar, you'll see that across the therapeutic areas and across the different digital health clusters and categories, there's a big difference in the amount of ventures with established clinical strength, right? Which makes a lot of sense. If you have a venture that's focused on teleconsultation, they're likely not generating evidence that their solution, which is an IT solution to connect patients with doctors, there's no evidence that this is benefiting the patient, right? Other than saying, okay, perhaps there's more adherence or there's more recurring visits, but this isn't something that you have a clinical trial to show, right? So something like a teleconsultation app or something like a wellness apps, I'll put that into a different category, right? But an online marketplace, other parts of digital health that don't require any sort of clinical evidence. Those are on one side of the spectrum as far as which clusters require evidence. The other side of the spectrum is, of course, digital therapeutics that require a lot of evidence, remote monitoring devices, perhaps diagnosis tools. These all 100% require clinical evidence. So that 76% is saying of the top 5 clusters that require clinical evidence, AstraZeneca's portfolios is 76% of those types of ventures, right? Check out the full report. You'll see across therapeutic areas, across the clusters, where clinical evidence is really being generated, and where, if you're investing in digital health or if you're looking to partner in digital health, where you should expect ventures to have that clinical strength. That's a lot of talking. Does that all make sense, Lawrence?
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. And to expand upon that a little bit, you're talking about some ventures need clinical evidence, some ventures don't need clinical evidence based upon what they're doing within the ecosystem. What percentage of the digital health ventures that need clinical evidence have established clinical evidence, and how is that trending?
Yeah, if we look specifically into North America, right, and that's the focus of our webinar today. Within North America, there are 553 ventures with clinical evidence signal above 40, right? So that's saying 18% of the private ventures within North America have the established clinical strength, right? 5% are building their clinical strength. That means it's between 0 and 40, right? They have some peer-reviewed publications, but they haven't crossed that magic number of 40. 77% of them don't. Maybe they don't need it. Maybe they are still working on establishing it. But that's the distribution that we're talking about. Of course, as you saw on a global scale, as far as the amount of evidence or the number of evidence that are reaching that milestone of 40, that number is increasing on a year-by-year basis, right? Over the past 10 years, the number has been increasing, now reaching something like 124. We're probably up to by now 200 ventures per year that are crossing that 40 number 40 threshold. So it's a positive trend, Lawrence, and we expect that trend to continue, especially now that, there's a twofold, especially now that funding is becoming more difficult, right? It's difficult to, it's not 2020, 2021, there's money everywhere, everyone got money. Now looking at venture funding, that money is not readily available. It's still there, but you have to prove yourself in order to get it. So one of the ways to prove it is then to start writing those peer-reviewed publications and start showing evidence that your solution works.
So there is a correlation then between funding stage and clinical evidence in North America.
There is, and that's what you'll see. In it's hard to say. It's a kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? As you go up in the funding stages, your percentage, your share of ventures with established clinical strength increases, right? M&As, you don't know at which point they've been acquired. So you can kind of put that to the side and say, maybe they're acquired at a young stage. But of course, as you gain funding, as I mentioned before, clinical trials are expensive. You have to have a couple million on hand in order to run a clinical trial in most cases. So that's when you'll see you need to get into those more advanced funding stages or have a good partnership in order to actually generate the evidence. Looking within North America, just to complete the slide, of course, 91% of the ventures with established clinical strength are in the United States. That's reflected quite clearly in also the number of ventures in the US compared to Canada and Mexico, right? So most of the ventures are sitting in the US, and that's also where the ventures are with established clinical strength.
So if there are that many sitting here within the US, can we take a closer look at a few of the digital health ventures in North America which have established clinical evidence status to better understand their profiles?
Yeah, we can. So in the report, we've spotlighted 3 different ventures. First of all, to just give you a flavor, these 3 ventures have a very high evidence signal. So that means they have collected a lot of evidence, or excuse me, generate a lot of evidence. You don't just collect it, you have to do something about it. If you notice their primary categories, you have one in remote monitoring devices, which is an evidence-heavy category. Second one is in diagnosis tools, same, and the third one's in disease management, right? Which also clinical evidence is going to help them at least prove to a healthcare professional that their solution is bringing a benefit to the patient, right? So you have 3 categories that are heavy in requiring evidence, right? They're all in the US. They've all reached their Series A, if not Series B funding, right? Now, if we look, for example, at, I think I have to get out of presentation mode, and then I can take you quickly to Health Tech Alpha, right? And look at the venture Hygieia. What you're gonna see is, I have to verify I am a person, yes. I have an automatic login. For any of you who don't yet have an Health Tech Alpha account, I strongly suggest go to healthtechalpha.com, sign up for a free account. You can start whenever you want to have a 7-day free trial of the pro level of Health Tech Alpha, and then you can get full information on the profiles of the different ventures. This particular venture is an insulin management system for type 2 diabetics, right? Suggesting to people how to adjust their insulin, right? On I think it says every few days rather than 3 to 4 times annually when you would go to see a specialist about that, right? So it is a disease management venture. They also have teleconsultation services, right? And as we talked before, disease management is one of those evidence heavy categories, right? They are B2C. They give their solutions directly to the patient, but they do have some pretty heavy hitting partnerships with insurance companies, right? Different clinics across the US. Now you'll see they have peer-reviewed publications talking about their solution, showing that or giving evidence that their solution works. They have patents. That's not part of the clinical evidence, and that's part of their product, their innovation signal. Clinical trials that they've completed, right? And then as well, they have FDA registrations, which are not part of the clinical evidence signal. We don't consider registrations. We consider any sort of approval or clearances that they might have. or they have CE markings within Europe. Okay, so they have significant regulatory evidence that their solution also works. Right? Could go through their profile. We don't really have time for that right now, but what you see is then that evidence signal at a very high level. So we could go through more if we wanted to, but we're running a little bit low on time.
Yes, we are running a little low on time, so why don't we open it up to any questions? If you want to type any questions you may have in the Q&A section, Sarah and I will be happy to answer those. So we'll open it up to questions.
As you mentioned before, Lawrence, this is an annual report, so we will be updating the report sometime in Q3 of this year. So now we have kind of a baseline with this report. We can see how that changes and see if our predictions of continued growth in clinical evidence and investment in those particular ventures that have established clinical strength, if that really does hold water. Be interesting to see.
Okay, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, as Sarah said, feel free to go to the Health Tech Alpha website and sign up for a free account. You can get, like you said, Pro for 3 days. And again, if you go to the Galen Growth website and go to the report page, you can download all our free reports. And again, those who belong to the Health Tech Alpha website, there is some other reports that are available to them. Oh, looks like we do have a question coming in.
Just a comment.
Oh, just a comment. Thanks for the okay. All right. And
appreciate your comment.
Yes, appreciate it very much. Again, Sarah's put up all of our information up here. Feel free to grab any of that. And thank you, everybody. And that'll end our webinar here today. Thank you, everyone, again.